Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Lifestyle Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Derek Williams, and I'm really excited about today's episode. I've got one of my favorite clients that I've been able to work with, Dr. Teagan Willes. How are you doing, Teagan?
I'm doing well. How are you, Derek?
Doing great. So Teagan and I recently had a coaching call, and I've been really impressed with his ability to focus and really work on himself and his practice. And I thought, man, there's so much good that you're doing. If you're willing to come on the show and record and share some of these things, I think it'd be incredibly valuable. So I appreciate you taking the time. So before we kind of get started into the content of like some of the things that we're going to talk about, tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself. Whether, growing up, dental school, how did you get into your practice? Where are you at? Stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Southern California, and I went to dental school at the University of Pacific. I just graduated in December of 2023, and I just purchased my practice right at the end of 2023. And so now I've been in practice ownership for just over a year now. And yeah, I'm in Southern California again with my wife. We both grew up here, and yeah.
Very cool. So tell us a little bit, how long did it take you to find your practice? Did you look at multiple others? What was that part of your journey like?
Yeah, I started looking at practices when I was still in dental school. I sent out mailers to a lot of practices in the area. I was working from the dental society's list. I could see how long dentists had been part of the dental society. So I was primarily focusing on dentists that had been practicing for a few decades and were um, more likely closer to retirement. So I was reaching out to them, telling them a little about myself, and asking if they would be interested in a buyout or transition. I visited several dentist offices on a couple trips home from school. So I got to talk face to face with some dentists and see if they knew anyone. I was also working with a transition consultant who had some really nice leads as well. So, and I was also looking up in Dental Trader some of the opportunities that were listed there as well. So I was using a lot of different avenues to both look for what opportunities were available as well as trying to understand how to evaluate practices more and more. And so after probably 6 months of looking and talking with a lot of different dentists, actually, it was probably longer than that even, finally landed on the practice that I ended up on.
Yeah, very cool. Appreciate you sharing that. It's everybody's story is a little bit different as far as like what allowed them and led them to find their practice. So let's kind of catch people up or tell us. So you purchased your practice. It's been what? It's been like a year now at this point, right?
Yep, just over a year now.
Yeah. So we started working together 6 months into your ownership. So tell everybody a little bit about that. What was the first 6 months like for you?
Yeah, the first 6 months was just trying to figure out how to be a dentist in a private practice. I had some kind of part-time associate work while I was looking to buy the practice, so I really hadn't been practicing very much dentistry in the months following graduation. So a lot of it was just trying to figure out the workflow, working in an office, getting to know the team, trying to figure out how to understand the business and manage the business, and really just try to get comfortable as a dentist and in the practice all at the same time, which is a lot to do all at once.
Yeah, it definitely is. Um, so talk a little bit about the progress that you felt like, where were you at the end of that 6 months, and kind of what led you to then making the decision to work together.
Yeah, so through those first several months of practice ownership, I was pretty on par with what the prior dentist was doing before I came in. I was a little lower, and I knew that there was a lot of practice potential. I could see that there were a lot of areas in which the practice was underperforming. So I had big goals and big aspirations for the practice, and I wasn't seeing um, kind of the change in trajectory that I was hoping to see. Part of that, I think, is attributed to being a very new practitioner and being slow, and also taking on all these other responsibilities that come with owning the practice. But after I did get settled in, after I felt more comfortable, I still felt like I wasn't seeing the growth that I wanted to see. So I had to, start looking at different things to kind of turn that in a direction that I wanted it to go, and that I knew that it could go.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, what was that like? I mean, I think one thing that it has was impressive to me as you kind of told me about some of these things was I think a lot of dentists in that kind of situation would feel discouraged, would feel like, okay, maybe I just need to keep pushing. I need to give it more time. What gave you the courage to make? I mean, you made some like relatively. I don't know if I'd say radical, but I'm kind of thinking along those lines. Like you made some kind of like drastic changes. Um, Talk about what those were and how are you able to do that?
Yeah, I think drastic is probably a good word. It was the more I looked at the practice and looked at myself and saw what everything that was happening and the things that I wanted to happen that weren't happening. I realized that I was hoping that things would happen more for me, that I would have people that would influence the practice in a way that would help it grow. And after really facing the facts, I realized that I had not been taking the accountability that I needed to take for the practice and for everything that was going on. So I really had to take a hard look at myself and appreciate that I was kind of the weak link here and not having the growth. So that led to making changes with the members on my team, both in the practice and my external team. So that meant it was about that time I got a new office manager, new front desk individual who's been amazing. I switched from my former consultant to lifestyle practice coaching with you. I got a new marketing person. So there were a lot of different people that I had to make changes and bring on a team that was more aligned with my vision. And I started taking ownership for anything that I didn't like or any failures in the practice. I was taking ownership for all of those and recognizing that I was the only one that was going to make the change, make the difference to see the growth that I wanted to. And then by surrounding myself with a team that was more in line with my vision, there's been a lot more support in moving toward those goals.
Yeah, that's great. I think again the challenge and the difficulty in what you just said really could be I don't know the word I'm thinking of, like, or couldn't be overstated. It's challenging when you're in the beginning of ownership to fire someone that's already been in the practice since you purchased it. It's difficult to look at the consultant that you're working with and think, okay, is this wrong, or is this just me? Do I need to apply things? So what were your thoughts in that situation with your consultant in making that decision? Because I know you reached out to me and kind of asked, hey, I've got this much time left with my consultant, and like we kind of had a conversation about it. So was that a tough decision to make? What were your thoughts going through that process?
Yeah, that was, I mean, in some ways that was a really hard decision. And in some ways it was, well, maybe it was a simple decision, but it was a hard decision. It was, my consultant was someone I liked a lot. I trusted him a lot, and he'd helped me a lot through different things with the practice. And so the help that he did offer me was invaluable at the stage where I was. But then after feeling like there was a lot more that the practice could do and realizing that my vision was different than his vision, once I faced the reality that I needed to take ownership of things and work with someone that maybe had higher goals than we were currently working with. Once I made the decision to switch, it was a very clear decision to work with lifestyle practice and with you, Derek. And I think I'd reached out to you in dental school just to get in touch with you, and maybe I think I was even reaching out to plan on working with you in the future. But I knew what the lifestyle practice had to offer. I was very familiar with the podcast. I'd listened to all the episodes, and I knew that there were things about the philosophy that really attracted me to it. And part of taking ownership of my life and my practice was highly motivated by the podcast and by both the stories that have been shared by the coaches as well as some of the clients that you've had on the podcast as well. So there were a lot of things that led me to make the decision to switch consultants, and it was an easy decision when I decided to switch that the lifestyle practice had everything that I wanted.
Yeah, I like the way that you worded that, where it was maybe a simple decision in the fact that like it was relatively clear to you, but the clarity of the path forward doesn't always make the path forward easy.
That's true. Yeah.
So, what would you say to other owners that find themselves in this situation, or I mean, any person? You know, I think we all resonate that with that idea that sometimes the path in front of us is relatively clear what we need to do. It's like it's staring us in the face, but you know, sometimes we just keep looking for how do I get around this. I don't want to go through this. I want to get around it. What would you say has contributed to your ability to face it directly, or what are the thoughts that you have when you're in the moment in those types of situations?
Yeah, as you were saying that, there were a couple books that came to mind. Both were books that I'd heard about on the podcast and decided to read, and they have been super helpful in reflecting back and falling back on those ideas. One is Extreme Ownership, and the other is The Obstacle is the Way. So even as you're just saying, how do I get around this? I don't want to go through it. Um, the Obstacle is the Way is a tremendous book about taking your difficulties head on and realizing that whatever's blocking your path is inherently the way forward. That's how you have to go to get to your destination. So instead of thinking of it as a barrier, think of it as illuminating your next step and showing you exactly where you need to go to continue on the course. And the Extreme Ownership is just realizing that you are accountable for anything under your domain. And so if you're really going to take charge of your life, you have to realize that, the buck stops with you. And if you're going to make it happen, or if it is going to happen, you have to be the one to make it happen. And so I like to try to maintain the mindset that any failures that happen in the practice fall on me, and any of the successes that happen in the practice are shared by everyone that participated. So that helps me both have gratitude and also discipline to take care of the things that I need to take care of, while also recognizing the efforts of those who contributed along the way.
Yeah, very well said. And it's like I was saying earlier. Or maybe I didn't say this earlier. It's one thing to uh, conceptualize and to like understand thing, yeah, conceptually, but it's another thing to actually experience it. So yeah, I applaud you for taking those opportunities, for taking ownership and recognizing that the obstacle is the way, for kind of just going right at it, because I think that is the fastest way to success. And I think I think you are a huge evidence of that so far.
Yeah, it's simple but not easy. I mean, the hardest part I think is you have to look yourself in the eye, and you have to approach yourself as the one that has both the answers and the one that's kind of holding you back, and you gotta make changes inside of yourself, and that's not an easy thing to do.
Definitely. Yeah. So let's transition now to, kind of the second point that we're going to talk about, after kind of reviewing some of the decisions that you made and kind of making some headway in your practice. Let's talk about goal setting. Because I think, you were already doing this, and I think we've kind of like put it on steroids in some ways. Like we've kind of like taken it to the next level. So tell me your perspective. Tell me, what was, how has your perception and understanding and application of goal setting changed in the last 6 months?
Yeah, there's been a big difference. I have not historically been an individual that sets a lot of personal goals in my life. And with the practice, I've felt more of a need to do that and more clarity in what those goals can look like. But the goals that I had, I was struggling to hit. And then when we started to working together, you really pushed me to really dream big, in a sense, to really set my vision really high. Anything you want, nothing off the table. Um, Figure out really where do you want to go, and then work backward from there. And then we started to set some goals that we agreed were achievable, but would stretch me, and were more aggressive than the goals that I had before. And as we've been going through that, setting goals and making plans has really illustrated that there is a clear path to hit those goals, and that they're not some, pie in the sky that you can dream about, but there's no road to. But we really looked at all of um, the things that had to happen in order to get there, and it's been really cool to see how much more progress we've made, and at the rate that we've made it than I thought we could.
Yeah. So expand on that a little bit. What do you think allowed for that to happen? You can kind of like speculate and say, well, because we set goals higher, it pushed you to think outside of the box and to, do things that you may not have otherwise. Maybe it was your mind holding you back or, um, yeah, I mean, what thoughts do you have in retrospect as far as trying to like really attribute the increase and the growth that you've seen?
Um, I've realized, and I don't mean to keep referencing books here, but recently having read Think and Grow Rich, the idea that the law of autosuggestion and the idea of transmutation, where you can basically create these ideas or focus on these ideas that are desires that you have, and you can influence your mind and your subconscious to kind of work in the background to achieve these goals, and you can kind of bring these desires that you have to fruition, and create the physical representation of these ideas. If it's whatever your goal is, you can create the reality there. And starting with the belief that you can do something is core tenant. And I think I've been held back a little bit on thinking what I personally can do or how fast I can do something. And by kind of challenging some of these limiting beliefs, I've been able to really expand what I think is possible. And already our rate of growth is making clear to me that both the goals that I set that I thought were maybe borderline unreasonable, like difficult, but maybe doable. I've already seen that we can move impressively quickly with concerted, specific, deliberate effort to reach those goals. So I'm just appreciating more and more the power of the mind in achieving things that I didn't think were necessarily possible.
Yeah, yeah. So, spoiler alert for the listeners. So, we kind of set goals together at the very beginning, and Teagan basically surpassed those goals as far as production per day in the first few months. So I think the second quarter working together, there was increased daily production by 50%, which is incredible, huge feat. Very very impressive and a lot of fun, to experience on both ends, for me to kind of see the hard work that you put in. But it's really interesting for me to listen because I think there's this kind of spectrum that you find people on when it comes to what we're talking about with mindset and limitations of the mind versus limits as far as actions. There's certain people that have huge goals and dreams, but their actions don't line up with it and they don't get the results that they want. And then there's other people that, work super, super hard, but, may have more limitations in their mind, or maybe they don't understand the importance of setting goals and stuff like that. And I think, you're definitely the person that kind of has fallen in the past more in this second category where, you've been a hard worker and put a lot of, action in place. But as you've been saying, as you've kind of recognized the limiting beliefs, you've raised the ceiling in your mind as far as what you believe is possible. And now because you've raised the ceiling as far as what your barrier is, now that goes up. Your hard work was already surpassing that. Your hard work was not the barrier; it was the limitation in your mind and in certain ways. So it's really cool to see how you kind of find which of those barriers is holding you back, and you focus on that, and that's a really good way to approach things and see how to progress. Would you agree with that, or add anything different?
Oh yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And it's interesting being in my shoes, having gone through what we've gone through in the last few months, where it feels a little bit kind of incredible that things could change as quickly as they did and as much as they did. And I'm almost sit back and a little bit in disbelief, like, I don't know if that could actually happen to me or to people. And then I have to look in hindsight and say that is that's my story, that's my situation. So even as I'm going through it, I'm thinking, that seems really unlikely that would work, and here it is working.
Yeah.
So trying to change my mindset and my beliefs, and even as I'm going through it, it's still a growth, and it takes some time, and I imagine that I'll continue to see improvement with that as I do more and increase my vision more. But it's cool to see it and also be in the process of believing it more and more.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because as you share that, I mean, like, I remember, my beginning out in ownership, where I had somewhat similar experiences where I was growing and like things were going really well, and there was that like thought and fear in the back of my mind, like, oh, what if this is just a fluke? Like, what if it's all going to come crashing down, and like, I'm not actually, this successful or anything like that. And it's really interesting because this past year of coaching with a new coach with Steve Hardison, it helped me realize that I actually still had a bit of a limiting belief, and what that limiting belief was is that I don't deserve the success and the richness in my life that I have. That and that's kind of what that is. You can call it imposter syndrome, but so my new in my document that I've created, I have this statement in there that says, I am fully responsible for the success and richness of my life. And that just allows me, it just brings me, it brings me a sense of peace. It brings me a sense of ownership, and allows me to kind of be who I am and understand that, life is how it is. And I don't need to worry about, what exactly is attributable and what isn't. But I'm responsible for the way that I experience life. I'm responsible for my happiness and richness, regardless of some of those other circumstances. That's just my pre-existing limiting belief is just something that wasn't serving me at all. And so I think, you're from my perspective, like, you've broken through that barrier and you're experiencing it and seeing it. And now the process from here is, to fully embrace it, to take responsibility and say, oh yeah, I put in the work, and it is because of that I got here. And I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to keep applying this, and it's just going to lead to more and more.
I love it.
Well, this has been a really enjoyable time together. I think we still have a good amount of things that I want to talk through. So what we might do is have another episode, have you back again, because I think we've had some really incredible results as far as case acceptance and focusing on patients in your practice, and seeing how that has led to the big increase in production per day that we've been talking about. So I really appreciate you coming on, Teagan. I'll see you back again. We'll record the next episode together. If anyone would like to reach out to you and ask for your perspective or advice on anything, is that something that you're comfortable with?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that.
What do you have social media, or what is the easiest way that they can reach out to you?
You can probably just send me an email at teaganwilles@gmail.com.
Yeah. Okay. We'll put that email in the show notes. I'll make a note to do that. So thank you. I really, really appreciate you coming on, being vulnerable and open, and kind of sharing some of your growths. It's been a lot of fun. I look forward to having you back for another episode.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to it as well.
Okay. Take care, Teagan.
Sicker than your average.